Hello and welcome. We're glad to have you with us.
Welcome to This is Motor Week 89. I appreciated that some weeks ago now, Jake included the Motor Week jingle or a portion of it. That was really joyful.
I appreciated that for all of 1989, Motor Week decided to rebrand itself. It was 88 also, wasn't there? Motor Week 88.
Yeah, they did it for like a 6-7 year period from spanning the late 80s and into the early 90s.
Not remembering that all of this shit, including everything we say here, lives in perpetuity.
Well, they didn't expect that. It was on TV. You know, it was just blasted into the air and then never seen or heard from again. Little did they know it was all going to end up on some massive archive.
YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
Best stuff on YouTube. Speaking of things that are permanent and last forever, trends in the market.
The market will always be shifting. So this is this episode is about me adventures of a used car salesman, using my front row seat in the market trends emerging to sort of comment on what's happening in the market right now. It's not actually all bad news for once, which is a welcome change of pace
nice to hear.
From my perspective. We'll just talk a little bit about sort of what drives value in the long term and what drives behaviors of buyers and how to get possibly even a deal or find maybe it's now the time to buy the car you've always wanted.
And some discussion about what the future looks like for different technologies that are in cars and what happens when our tastes change, or will they, or why will they? All of this and more on this episode of the Carmudgeon Show, which is part of the Haggerty Podcast Network. That is Derek Tam-Scott. He owns a company called OT Sand Company.
Off-topic sand, OTS and Company. Yes, that's our used car dealer. We sell not Daewoo's yet, but someday soon, I hope.
One day, you never know.
Yes.
And this is, my name is Jason Cammisa, if you don't know that already. And if you like this type of content, you could consider supporting Derek at his OT Sand Company adventures by buying some $30 million Ferrari or something. And if you like this content here, you could also consider joining the Haggerty Drivers Club,
which offers a subscription to our award-winning magazine.
Includes. Yeah.
And free unlimited flatbed towing for all of your classic vehicles.
Mm-hmm. And roadside assistance.
And
towing, yeah.
And towing, flatbed towing. And access to discounts and unlimited access to our valuation tool.
Which is an important component of this episode.
It is.
See, our bosses will be very happy to know that we've talked about the Haggerty Valuation Tools department.
I use them on a daily basis.
Every day?
Twice on Sunday.
All right. Bye. Clap, please. All right. What do you want?
I want to tell everyone that everything's going to be okay.
So it's the comedy, it's the absurd episode.
Yes,
ladies and gentlemen.
The Dadaisme episode. That's like French absurdist, like the businessman in the bowler hat. It's like nonsensical. Never mind. Okay,
yeah, I'll tell you what's nonsensical.
By its nature, Dada is nonsensical. Okay, so I thought it would be a good time to talk about the car market and its nature right now, because it has been very discouraging for a long time. And don't worry, it still remains discouraging.
Yay! What's going on?
No, I would say that it is a less discouraging time to be interested in buying cars than it was a couple years ago.
It was discouraging then because shit got too expensive.
Yes, that's right. And stuff is definitely more expensive than it has been in certain times in the past. That is the nature of inflation, I guess. But I would also say that it's much more of a buyer's market right now than has historically been the case like in recent memory. So if you were thinking about buying an enthusiast car, I actually think you have a much better chance now than you did 2 years ago when everything felt super hopeless.
Except that your mortgage has gone from $4 a month to $42,000 a day, thanks to inflation and interest rates.
If you have a adjustable rate mortgage, that is true. Or if you're
adding
a new mortgage,
car got totaled and your new car loan is a 57% interest rate. Or
Yes.
your car insurance has gone up by 4,000% in the last 2 years.
Haggerty's rates have been pretty stable, actually.
Mine went up a little bit, but I mean,
Really?
the overall insurance rates for the country have experienced the largest increase in 200 years.
I am speaking from the point of an enthusiast, and this, I guess, is aimed specifically not at people who can't enter at all, which we have spoken about at length, but to people who are like, man, I'll never be able to afford X or Y or Z car because it went wacko during the pandemic. I have noticed some changes in the market that could be heartening for certain folks if you thought you'd never be able to buy an air-cooled 911 or a manual transmission BMW M3 or, whatever thing. There's definitely opportunity in the market right now. General sort of temperature has changed. It's not like the bottom has fallen out or anything like that, but I would say what we have now is rational, which was not true for long periods in recent memory.
Is the idea of classic car ownership ever rational? I'm going to play the voice of the commenter in his underwear. Hold on, let me take my shorts off.
We'll wait. Hopefully for at least the end of the episode. So classic car ownership is intrinsically not rational. That's true. And so I guess the definition of rational here is that it's the behavior, that there's the ability to make sense of market trends, I guess is what I'm saying. And so, there used to be a tendency, and I'm sure this will happen again in the future, but it's not happening right now, which is why I wanted to call attention to it, which is the fact that, no matter what it was, everything would basically sell on Bring a Trailer. The market was so superheated that there would be a buyer somewhere who wanted something or just wanted to get into the market, and there was so much less supply than demand, and this, of course, happened with new cars too, and that's why you had ADMs on boring-ass cars that I can't even be bothered to think of an example of. I don't know, Toyota RAV4 Grand Highlander Coupe or whatever the fuck modern people are buying for driving.
Jake is typing, which means he's going to Photoshop together a Toyota RAV4 Grand Highlander Coupe. Don't forget, it also should probably be a hybrid.
Obviously. Yeah. So parts of the market are more rational, and that is to say that things are not just selling because they exist. There was at one point a phase where someone would be like, you have Porsche with manual transmission? I'll take it. What year is it, and what color is it, and how many miles does it have? They'd ask that after agreeing to buy it, practically. Now, things are selling at numbers where you could be like, oh, that's reasonable, or things are more frequently reserved not metting, or selling at numbers where you're like, oh, that's kind of a good deal, which is a feeling that I think a lot of us haven't experienced in a while. So that's what I mean by rational. It's more balanced, not in favor of just sellers, but I think that as buyers, there's actually opportunity to be selective or discerning or pass on stuff because it's too shitty or too expensive or too anything. And so it's not as discouraging of a time to be out there trying to be buying something if you are in the place to be buying anything at all. Okay. And that's true for, it's infinitely true for stuff that has had demographic shift away from, which is stuff that is too old for anybody to care about. And these are, topics that old timers talk about often. Like every year at Car Week, there is a get together where a bunch of dealers get together in the room, and it is immensely illuminating. Because you have, people who are like me, who are younger, and then there are these guys who've been doing this since the year of the flood, and you see a really dramatically different perspective based on those people. It's the same, I guess, people who would be buying boomer type cars also.
Well, what's the different perspective, right? So what are the old people saying versus the young people?
Yeah, in body. I see what you have to say about that. One of my favorite quotes from a certain person is that...
wow, Greeny, what? Right?
Who could say? Why on earth is a McLaren F1 worth 4 times as much as a Jaguar D-Type? That just makes no sense to me.
I almost just actually spit my water out.
Well, so yes, so that's representative of the old guard, or Duesenberg sales have slowed, which actually apparently they haven't. Apparently there's a new generation of people in their 40s buying Duesenbergs, which is news to me. I certainly don't know any of them, but that's cool. Duesenbergs are really neat cars, and I'd love to drive one someday, but never have. So and then there's some of these guys are the guys who move tons of metal at Barrett-Jackson, and they have a very interesting perspective about what happens in that segment of the market, and it's totally foreign to me. And then there's the guys who are younger, who are sort of more in touch with emerging trends and who understand that yes, GT3s are pretty cool and should be valuable, and not just I don't know, Gullwings. Or so that dynamic is always very interesting. Then there's one guy who's super into JDM stuff, and all the guys are like, "What? That car costs $1 million, but it's a Nissan.
But it's a Japanese car.
Yeah,
Foreign job.
Can't even make a. I mean, apparently their radios are okay. I guess I'm coming around to that idea. But good cars, but like I could never.
I'm totally crashing this.
It's really illuminating. It's really colorful.
I'm going. Even if I have to put a waiter outfit on and start serving, but I will dump hot soup on people just for fun.
Yeah, it's a really interesting experience. The other thing that and it's put on by Hagerty, and there's a bunch of data from the Hagerty data team, which is always super illuminating. And that's stuff about like percentage of quotes that are coming from various demographics, boomers, pre-boomers, and various generations, and to the extent to which they're getting quotes on this versus that versus anything at all versus nothing at all. So that's very interesting. Speaking of data from Hagerty, I think it was you who sent me the incidence of frequently insured cars by Hagerty, like the volume of cars that is insured by Hagerty. That is just the top. I don't even remember what number of cars it was.
I think I sent you the top 30, and 28 of them were Corvettes.
And Mustangs and Ford Model A's. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know that maybe there was one or two cars that weren't American on the list. Or was it entirely American cars?
Entirely American.
The top 30 cars insured by Hagerty. And it was split out by years. So they would classify a 64 Mustang as different from a 65 Mustang. Right. It was really,
but yeah, it was. So it's year, make, model basically is how that was broken out, and it was really illuminating. Like I don't think there was anything foreign on that list.
Yeah.
And then by the time you got from number 1 down to number 30, the raw number decreased by a factor of 10. Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you're looking
like
at
20,000 of these, and
then you're down at like number 31, and there's now 2,000 of these or 1,500 of these.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is actually there's a lot of homogeneity. There's a lot of similar collectors around. Right?
Yeah.
Which is amazing to me when I saw that list. Like, how is a 65 Mustang worth anything when we insure 2.7 million of them? Like, I was staggered by that, the sheer number of some of these cars.
Yeah. So I recently wrote our company recently sold the most expensive on Bring a Trailer ever to sell BMW E46 M3. And so the Hagerty wrote an article about it, and then they asked me to do a sort of market survey on E46 M3s. And one of the things that I noted with that car, so our car was Laguna Seca Blue, which is a color that is worth twice maybe as much as a regular color, which is, I can't think of any specific example besides that one where that happens, just with color. I mean, maybe
a 2x multiplier on I don't.
Like a purple Diablo 30 SE is worth more, but not twice as much.
Right.
And
is that in the Hagerty? So the Hagerty price guide will also say like plus 50% for a manual, plus 25. That would be hilarious.
They do for transmissions,
right? But it would be hilarious to say plus 100% for LSB.
That is basically statistically true. So we're going to get a little nerdy into this, but in January of this year, a Laguna Seca Blue 2001, so first year with gray interior, and I think that like 60 or 70% of them had gray interiors with Laguna Seca Blue. They made 1,128 coupes for the U.S. that were Laguna Seca Blue. So gray interior with sunroof, with both of which people are like, people would prefer a black interior and no sunroof. So not a particularly desirable, other than it had 18,000 miles. Sold for $90,000 on Bring a Trailer. And then in February, a silver one that was also, I think it was also pre-facelift, and it had a black interior with 15,000 miles, so fewer miles, sold for 50 instead of 92. And then that car was relisted later because somebody failed to buy it, and then it's the second time it sold for 40. So,
but this was not an aberration. This is not an
no,
anomaly.
that's like a normal price for
a
a silver car with a sunroof with unremarkable configuration but low mileage. It's literally sold for half on average. If you average the 40 and 50, it comes out to 45, which is half of 90. Although that car sold for
I'm racking my brain trying to think of anything else where color is that much of a big
determinant
deal.
of value. Yeah. So the one we sold had twice the mileage, had 29,000 miles, and it had a cinnamon interior, which they made 19 of for coupes for the U.S. or for North America, of which 15 were stick shifts, and there were 2 that had no sunroof, and only one of them was a stick. So ours was the only stick shift in that color combination. I know this sounds like nerdy Corvette shit, but point is that we found this car with the original owner, and we're like, oh man, this car is going to break the internet. And it set the all-time record despite having had a repaint on the hood and having twice the mileage of a car that sold for $40,000.
What was the final selling price?
It sold for $112 Hammer.
That's crazy.
Which is 117.6. Although then the guy who won it subsequently was like, I don't have any money, which is another phenomenon I was going to want to highlight in today's market, is that because it is more of a buyer's market, buyers can behave badly and not follow through with their commitments. So we also sold a Mondial, and the guy afterwards, he was like, is the roof convertible top watertight? And I said, no, it leaks some water in. And they did this when they were new, because the guy who owns the Ferrari shop that we sort of are associated with, Patrick Otis Company, worked on these cars when they were sold new, and he told me this story about how he had sold one new, and the guy took it to dinner in the city, and they got stuck in a rainstorm, and they were on their way to some gala, and it ruined his wife's dress, and that was a brand new car, still under warranty. And the guy was like, you misrepresented the car. I don't want to buy it anymore because the convertible top on a 35-year-old Italian car is not watertight.
That was not watertight
when
35
it was new,
years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And I straight up to that guy was like, I don't think you're the kind of guy who's ready to buy a vintage Italian car, honestly. Like, they're all going to have something like this. And if that's not the kind of thing that you can come to terms with, this might not be the right type of automotive experience for you.
How about a Solara?
Yeah. I did it in a respectful way, and I think he took it to heart, and he sort of agreed, and he didn't seem offended. But I mean, this is representative, of the types of people who buy entry-level Ferraris, honestly. Like this, I don't know if this is this a bombshell or not, that the type of people who buy entry-level Ferraris are...
Look, you're looking at me like I bought an entry level.
I did it.
Something I me too. But I deal in shit boxes typically, so yes. I expect old cars to have issues, and I expect old cars that had issues when they were new to continue to have issues. And so my expectation level, nothing bothers me more than someone saying this car costs $300,000. It should not have a rattle inside. Okay, that's not what your fucking GT3 is about. These people. So I feel like most people who put money into something without any understanding of what goes into it
and what it actually is, what its true nature is.
Right. Yeah, you're not buying a McLaren F1 for its lack of squeaks and rattles. So I feel like, yes, an entry-level Ferrari buyer is probably a different way of saying that would be an untrained Ferrari buyer, somebody with a less discerning eye.
Yes,
and therefore they're more likely to have
or not a complete understanding of what the car actually is, or if it represents.
Because if they did, they wouldn't be driving a Mondial, is what you're saying.
Well, I like the Mondial.
Me too, but it's the sort of, you either like it because it's so different than all the other Ferraris, or because you don't know any better and don't have the budget for it. Is that fair? Let me think. Is that the definition of an entry-level Ferrari buy? Is that? I guess the question is that what makes it an entry-level Ferrari?
Well, I think it's price.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm saying. If the Mondial was that good, would it still be worth nothing? Nothing in terms of Ferrari terms.
I don't think so, because I think there's a lot of unspoken heroes and sort of there's bandwagoning. And this is another concept that I think is affecting the market dynamic right now, which is that there is this tendency for information to be spread rapidly and trends to be rapidly disseminated by social media in a way that didn't exist 20 years ago. And it has interesting effects on the market, whether that is like, I want to go to Luftgekühlt, and so I have to get an air-cooled Porsche, and everybody gets a Porsche, and we complain about this on a regular basis about how people who don't truly get the essence of Porsche are buying Porsches right now because it is a recognized status symbol and they're good investments, and there's a whole bunch of host of reasons why people buy Porsches that are not really related to the intrinsic characteristics of the car.
Yep.
And I think that's a problem. And by the same token, green on tan is a really hot colorway, and I've always really liked it, but now it's like in vogue, and so everybody is bandwagoning on that, or whatever the trend is. So I think that there's a bunch of undervalued corners of the market. I think the Ferrari Mondial is like this. When you experience a Mondial, which you have, and you experience it against a 308 QV that is worth twice as much money, or 328 that's worth twice as much money, and you drive them back to back, I prefer to drive the Mondial as an experience. And so I think that it's a sort of under the radar car in the same way that a 308 GT4 is an under the radar car. Not everybody, especially, I sold a beautiful one in 2011 for 22 and a half or 23 and a half, 308 GT4. And they're getting a little more expensive now. But the point is that if it hasn't been sort of mainstreamed by this sort of
Revelations
machine by the machine, which
absolutely.
Revelations episodes are a component.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they single-handedly do that, because there's certainly cars that you have featured, like ZR1 C4 ZR1 Corvettes are still free, and you did an episode about that, and shouldn't be.
Right.
So there's undiscovered corners of the market that exist, whether that's C4 ZR1s or Ferrari Mondials or whatever's. And so I don't know that they necessarily should be cheap, Mondials. In 4 seats, right? 4-seat Ferraris are always worth less money. That's just the way it is.
Ferraris that are not Pininfarina designed, sexy,
sort of icons of design.
Yep.
Yeah.
Supercar looking things. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And the Mondial doesn't exactly do that, although I think it's very handsome in its own right. As is the case also with the 2+2s. The most valuable 2+2 Ferrari in the world is worth $500,000, I think. Yeah,
that's it.
I think so.
I
don't think there is a 4-seat Ferrari that you could get more than $500,000 for.
Interesting.
And obviously, if you then change that border to, instead of 4-seat Ferrari, change it to road car Ferrari, because race car Ferraris are always worth tons of money. What's the most expensive road car Ferrari? It is, if you count the street version of the 250 SWB, that's $5 to $10 million depending on the quality, instead of $500,000. So there's a big step there, unless you're talking about 275 Narts, which they made 10 of, and those are $25 million or whatever.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, indeed. Well said. So yes, where were we talking about? I went off on a tangent.
You were talking about whether we were discussing entry level Ferraris and whether that buyer is untrained and that's why the car's cheap and blah blah blah. But prior to that, so you're talking about buyers behaving badly because they can.
Yes, that's a fact of today's market, and it's frustrating. And there's a fundamental issue, I think, with Bring a Trailer specifically, is that what they should do is impose penalties on people for failing to perform, but I think oftentimes they don't want to do that because they don't want to alienate them. And depending on how egregious the infraction is, they will do that, but I think they're too permissive with allowing people to behave badly and sort of renege on purchases. And it's a sort of thing that I've noticed is happening with increasing frequency because of the market conditions. When it was really a seller's market, everyone would follow through with the purchase because they were just so happy to have had something come to fruition that they got into a car. And now, this is the nature of the market when it's more balanced. And it manifests itself in other ways. For example, it takes longer to sell cars, or you have to sell the car more than once. And by that I mean you have agreed to a deal and then somebody doesn't come through, and then you have to sell it to someone else afterwards instead of just selling the car once. It becomes a lot more work to sell to sell the cars. So, as prospective buyers, then, dear reader, you can take that to heart and say, like, if you just follow through and, like, do what you say you're going to do and offer reasonable money, you have actually kind of a sporting chance at buying today. And so it's not as discouraging as it certainly was in the past. That having been said, to return to the E46 M3 example, if there's something really extraordinary and unrepeatable, then it still seems to do pretty wild things in the market right now. And so if you just have to have it, and my counsel to people buying cars is to, and this is true no matter what the car is, if you are so attached to a specific car because of whatever reason, and that could be the specification or the options or whatever thing about the car is, that you're like, this is the one I absolutely have to have, the unfortunate reality is that you don't have much leverage.
You're going to have to double your
And
budget.
you have to pay whatever it takes to get the car. If you find that car and it's like, it's the one, it's the unicorn, it cannot get away from me, then you kind of have to do whatever it takes. And I learned this lesson pretty early on because I found that car and then I tried to play hardball and then the guy was like, well, fuck you. And I was like, wait, undo. How do I undo? And so I would always counsel buyers to assess your willingness to walk away. If you are truly willing to walk away, don't be afraid to do that. And if the car is a shitter for whatever reason, if it's rusty or undisclosed or disclosed accident damage, or ask yourself, how easy would it be to find another one of these cars? Is this truly unrepeatable? And are the things that make it unrepeatable so important to me that I just have to buy this one? And if the answer is yes, then like, good luck to your wallet. But congratulations on your new car.
Right.
But if it's easy to replace or find another one or substitute, then it is absolutely worth playing hardball or walking away and being willing to do that and just doing it and waiting for the next one to come along. But yeah, so when think about the sentence, or we use this line sometimes, which is find another one. If the price is high, but find another one. And if that attribute is if the things about it that are important to you, then you kind of have to buy that one. Doesn't mean you can't negotiate politely, or inquire, or sort of feel out price flexibility. And the other thing, let's see, while I'm offering counsel, this is just me counseling, understand the market, which is just like data, like just look at a bunch of data, and also like these intricacies we're talking about with the E46 M3 market. If objectively speaking, to the uninitiated, a Laguna Seca blue car at $90,000 is completely nonsensical. And so you have to sort of familiarize yourself with the intricacies of that market and understand that manual seats and no sunroof like really do add value for those things. And by the same token, if you're a seller, you can't come to someone and say, mine is an SMG convertible and it therefore is worth as much as a manual coupe. Like, you just can't, that's very common in the marketplace, where people don't understand the sort of really intimate details of what drives value in the marketplace. So that's another thing to really understand. But any time you're trying to be buying, if meaningful amounts of dollars are in play, then you have to understand the intricacies of what drives the market, and then just come at people with comps. Some people respond to that, some people don't. But if you look at it's very easy to get access to data now in a way that publicly that used to not
especially
be true.
As an HCC member.
Yes. Valuation
Unlimited
tools.
access to our valuation tools.
Yeah. The other good one, obviously, is Bring a Trailer. Use classic.com also, which aggregates Bring a Trailer and a whole bunch of other public sales of stuff. And then you can really quickly establish the market on stuff. So that's...
So long as you're not using a Laguna Seca blue, no sunroof, manual seats, cinnamon interior, manual M3 as a
one
comp
owner,
for your convertible silver
SMG
car that's been rolled down 3 flights of stairs.
That's correct.
Right.
That is exactly right. So sort of knowledge is certainly power, and the access to data is really impressive now. Like if I could give myself of 20 years ago a snapshot of how easy it is to get actual real world market data about what cars are selling for, I would have just combusted from excitement. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. What else do I want to cover here? Do you have anything to add while I'm going through this? No. Okay.
I mean, I guess the only question that I have is, are cars still outperforming inflation, or have those two numbers sort of converged in terms of ownership? Because a year ago or 2 years ago, we talked about classic cars being a good place to park money because they were keeping up with or outperforming what small inflation we had. We don't.
Yeah, it depends on the timeline, I guess, in question.
Never 3 months, never 6 months.
Yes,
over multiple years.
That's right. I would say on multi years. So this is a fundamental question about what is the future of the market actually. And do we sort of fundamentally believe that people will continue to like cars and buy them, and everyone agrees that this is cool and it should be bought and has intrinsic value,
and we're allowed to drive them and register them?
Well, that's an extra long time horizon, and that's probably also difficult to comment on. Right. But I think there will also be signs of when that happens. You start to get the inklings
in Europe
of them. Yes, I was just going to say, you get the inklings of them in Europe where it's harder to use cars in certain environments or places you just can't go with them. And so, maybe my thoughts on that are different, or the answer to that question is different for Europeans.
And by the way, not just Europe, Californians. I mean, so California is 40% of the new car buying market, right? So we have to be.
That's a huge number.
That's not that big. But California
our
emission
population is like 60 million people.
But look at the people who buy cars. I mean, California is a huge part of the new car market, but in terms of the used and classic car market, we have to be grossly out of proportion with our population. Part of that's geography, part of it is wealth, for all those reasons. We have a standardized exemption for 1975 and older cars are exempt from smog, and that hasn't changed in many years. Right? Exempt from biennial smog tests. Because that 1975 exemption hasn't changed, by definition, the number of classic cars, however you want to define classic cars, collectible and classic cars, is ever increasing. So every year, in fact, California is making it harder and harder to buy older cars because now all of these cars are aging into a collectible world, and it's difficult to get them to remain roadworthy.
Yes, registerable.
And so
glory be to God, however. That was a weird thing to say. Thanks be to Allah. That equally weird. I'm very grateful for the fact that a lot of these cars that are now subject to these restrictions have electronic fuel injection and catalytic converters, because if you have a well-maintained, not worn-out car with electronic fuel injection and catalytic converter, it has a very good chance of actually passing the regulations by wide margin. Like my R129 SL is not only like well under the passing threshold, but it is also well under the average, for all fleet in California, even though it's 30 years old. Right. So the problems, I think, challenges really exist for cars that are from like the second half of the 70s. Exactly, where they are still maybe carbureted cars, and there's certain cars that are harder than others, like Porsche 930s are a little grumpy because they have mechanical injection, and just managing sort of fueling.
Any of the BMW stuff that has thermal reactors versus catalytic converters, those are nightmares.
Do that too. Yeah, anything that's not catalyzed and with electronic fuel injection, I think, is a little bit of a bear. And that 30-year exemption that smog exemption used to be a rolling 30-year exemption, and then they fixed it after 2005. Which was very inconvenient for me, who in 2005 bought a 1977 automobile with the expectation that it would soon be able to be registered in California.
Wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was deeply inconvenient. But everyone has sort of identified workarounds of one sort or another to continue to enjoy classic cars. And the whole gray market thing is also extremely difficult.
I just can't imagine the difference. I can't imagine that the price of 1976 through 1985 cars overall wouldn't be far higher if California made them easier to register. Being the significant portion of the market that we are, I can't help but think that a 1976 model year something wouldn't be 20% more valuable worldwide if you included California in the potential buyers.
Yeah, you see that unfold in a couple of interesting places like Ferrari 308s and Porsche 911s, where there was a 1975 version that's basically identical to 76, and the later cars do seem to actually be worth less.
Yeah. There has to be a 20, 30, 40% drop in value of something from the 75 model year to 76.
Fortunately, it's kind of a shitty era for cars anyway.
Fair point.
The malaise era,
Yeah.
which we have spoken about at
And
length.
bad enough that the cars were shit. Now they're even that much more difficult. It's like a double kick in the nuts that they're that much more difficult to own.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that. So yeah, I mean, are there? Let's see.
So I guess my question is, for the cars that we are most interested in, which tend to be 80s, stuff like that, what's the market outlook? Still sort of bare, or is that really slowing down and people are not interested in them so much?
No, it's not that people are. So what happened during the pandemic is that everyone's interest got focused on cars because there was a lot of stuff that we couldn't do. And so cars remained one of the few things that you could still do during the pandemic, and it drove the market to do irrational things. Now everyone is having sort of revenge travel and doing all sorts of things. I think a lot of people entered the car market because they were bored, or it was like a sort of casual interest, but it was something that they could still do. And so you ended up with these really peculiar dynamics that were very singular and representative of a particular moment. And that has all passed. And what has happened as a result of this is, I think it's a healthier market because there's more balance between buyers and sellers. And I think that there should be some balance between those for a healthy market. Otherwise, you end up with these sort of really demoralizing situations where nobody can buy anything that they want. And it's really depressing. And so as a result of that market returning to a more rational place, the true enthusiasts who have always been into cars and always will be into cars are sort of allowed to sort of wander around and exercise their interest and move freely between cars in a way that wasn't possible before, and that's kind of encouraging. And so all the dyed-in-the-wool enthusiasts, happy time to be into cars. All the speculators or fair weather fans or sort of fad people wandered away and are getting distracted by some other shiny thing that's not cars. And
especially when you can just park the money in a bank account and make 5% interest.
Yes.
Right? I mean, with no holding fees.
Yes.
Right? No garaging, no insurance, no gas, no maintenance.
Yeah. And so it's returning, the earth is returning to the true inheritors of the earth, the true enthusiasts who actually are passionate about the car and are not thinking about, how is this going to perform as an investment, or I'm going to turn this and make a few bucks or anything like that.
Do you see speculators moving into the late 90s and aughts phase?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's already happened.
Where are they going? Like, what cars are the hottest sort of?
Whatever anyone lusted after as a child. That will always be the answer.
Speculators already, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Carrera GTs and 997 GT3s and Ferrari 360 Challenge Stradales and the curse of the manual transmission thing is currently really important, but I think eventually it'll fall by the wayside as manual transmissioning becomes less common. I'm guessing, if I had to hypothesize.
You mean the manual transmission thing? You meaning
that people really fetishize manual? No. I think that will continue to persist. Interesting. I think that as new categories of collector cars emerge, people will necessarily have to be okay with two-pedal cars because manual transmission cars disappeared at a certain point, 2012 or whatever year you want to choose. Stuff like the performance of Lexus LFAs as investments, or 599 GTOs, or F12 TDFs, or 458 Speciales. All of these two-pedal cars, which are truly, genuinely, properly collectible by all measures, and not just like, oh, that's pretty valuable for a car with two pedals. It's like those cars are getting into the territory of actually being genuinely collectible.
Although I would pull 458 Speciale out of there because that's a dual clutch, and everything else you mentioned, I think, was a single clutch automated manual.
Yeah.
So that to me is the lost generation of cars. Except that you drive an LFA, and of course that transmission is terrible.
Yes.
But the rest of the experience is so incredibly good that it doesn't actually ruin the car.
And I have seen people trying to say this, and I don't know whether they're just trying to convince themselves and others, or whether they truly believe it, but they talk about the sort of brutality and rawness and shittiness of single clutch.
Toyota talked about that during the LFA's development. They apparently evaluated the DCT and decided against it because they wanted the direct connection and this brutality of those shifts. And I don't know if that was PR bullshit.
Smells like horse manure to me.
Yeah, to me too.
Especially after driving the car.
I mean, we should do an episode on the LFA. It's time. But but also all of the things that were shitty back in the day that defined an era wind up becoming actually a value.
Yeah, it becomes a charming throwback to a certain era, whether that's like, shag carpeting mid-century, 70s houses with fake wood paneling. Like there's definitely like when you watch what is the show that takes place in the 80s?
Stranger Things?
Is it Stranger Things that takes place in the 80s?
It did, yeah. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but that one did.
So there's this fetishization towards like certain eras, and stuff that was like terribly outdated and awful starts to wrap around. I remember this happened like in the 2000s, everything was gray. That was the really in vogue color. Titanium, silver, BMWs, everything had, the absence of color. But because what happened was Porsches were all red in the 80s and into the early 90s. And they're like, oh God, that's so like horrible, yuppie 80s to have it be red. And so everything went gray in the 2000s, Atlas gray and Seal gray and, like all of these. And it was sort of universal. There's colors sort of start to define eras. And obviously for 70s cars, that's these really like
pastels,
Skittles colors. And then at some point it comes back into vogue. And so I could certainly see that happening with the shittiness of single clutch transmissions.
I think it's happening. I think for some cars, it's no longer a deal breaker.
It's no longer a deal breaker, but people are people really saying that they prefer it? I mean, do you prefer the shittiness of a LFA or a 599 F1? I just can't bring myself to like it.
I don't like any two-pedal cars, but I would say that
But would you rather have a single clutch or a dual clutch?
Depends on the car. I would.
Would you prefer the LFA if it had a dual clutch?
No. I don't think I would care either way, but I do think that would be a $7 million car if it was a manual.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that I agree. Not $7 million, but yes, point taken.
Why not? Why not? They made 499 of them. Couldn't sell the fucking things. So who knows?
499 is too many.
Ooh,
for a car to be worth $7 million.
Fair point.
I think for a car to be worth $7 million, you need to have made fewer than 200. Yeah.
Okay, fair point. But either way,
the car would be much more valuable.
Yes,
given that they made 500 examples of that car, I could see it being worth.
What is a 599 GTO worth?
No, less.
Oh.
Under like low ones.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, I should have one.
Well, we should stop recording right now so that Jason may go purchase a 599 GTO.
Having just read a comparison test of those two cars, actually, I found that very interesting. 599 GTO got beaten by LFA in Car and Drivers comparison test.
That's because they were measuring in this sort of objective...
No, the LFA was more thrilling.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 599, it's a Grand Tourer.
Even the GTO?
Yeah. I mean, it's loud as fuck.
I thought the GTO is like a little unhinged. I've never driven a GTO.
Handling-wise, oh, you really? Oh,
no, I've driven a TDF, but
no, unhinged.
The TDF is a little scary.
Really?
I think so.
No? 599 GTO was a little scary, but I didn't spin it.
In a good way.
Yeah, it's spicy. It was great, but the LFA is more special. The 599 GTO is at the end of the day a variant of a really nice, luxurious GT that does everything well. Yeah. And the LFA is its own thing. Mm-hmm. It's not like a variant of anything else. That's it. It's just an LFA. Yeah. But yeah, I find the DCT thing I find interesting because I'm turned off by any DCT, and back in the day was really turned off by a single clutch automated manual. I would not have allowed any of my friends to buy a 360 Challenge Stradale, despite the fact that one of them did, because of course, what the fuck, he's not going to listen to me. And it was a truly magical experience. The engine, the noise of it, the whole feeling of it. Mm-hmm. I have no interest in it.
What if it's a manual?
If it was a manual,
have you driven a manual one?
I've only ever driven that Stratos.
We got a 360 CS manual conversion in,
and
I haven't driven it yet.
Okay, the Stratos is top 10 cars I've ever driven. I mean, I don't think you had that positive of an experience with it, but I did a whole Icons episode on it.
I didn't get to use it that much.
It was like driving a Lotus Elise with a fucking amped up to 250%. Mm-hmm. It was unbelievable, and there were problems with it. Right? It's not it's like kind of buggy. A kit car build. The big issue when we were filming was that the intake manifold had some horrendous resonance, and it was the worst sounding car I've ever heard in my life, unless you were at full throttle, and that was fixed after after production. So we cut that section of the episode out before it ever went live. And there were some, build quality issues. It's a hand built sort of thing. The big issue though was no flywheel weight. So that was designed. The engine was designed to be used with an F1 gearbox, which can shift so quickly.
They made a manual version of that car though.
Of the regular 430, yeah. But I think that one might have had a bigger flywheel. The car was a pain in the ass to shift quickly enough. But you drive around it and it just wound up becoming part of the charm. And then you get into anything else and anything else was so slow to respond. And so I would have put, if I had my M18 New Stratos, I would put a slightly heavier flywheel on it just to make it a little bit easier to deal with. Plus that car had shift linkage issues because it was not
converted.
fully done.
A lot of converted cars have issues like that.
So it wasn't quite perfect, but still one hell of an experience. But I wouldn't have even looked at that car twice if it was a single clutch.
Yeah, and I guess the long-term question is that mentality that you possess and that I also possess, it has to go away. It will
as
get
people
removed
stop
from the buying pool, right? As the new generation comes into buying.
Because they don't know how to drive a manual, you mean?
Yeah, or that it's just not important to them. In the same way that, you have no real or sort of hesitance about a carbureted versus fuel-injected car. There was probably a generation of people that preceded you that would be like, I would never buy an enthusiast car with fuel injection. I just couldn't do it. It has to be carbureted. And that's an important distinction to them, but that you're like, I don't give a shit. I grew up around fuel-injected cars. I've had plenty of enjoyable fuel-injected car experiences.
Once you experience a carbureted car, you realize you're missing a lot with most fuel-injected stuff.
But there's plenty of fuel-injected cars that you would still buy. And my question is, in the long term, are there going to be people who are like, I would absolutely buy this and lust after it. It has two pedals. I don't give a shit. That's a two-pedal car. I drive that when I feel like that, and but I have other car that's manual transmission, and I have them both, and it just depends on the day or whatever.
I agree with you that it's going to happen. I think but for a different reason. I think it's going to happen when we switch to EVs. People will look back at combustion cars and not know or care. I'm looking 20 years in the future, obviously, but in 20 years, when people have only ever been exposed, somebody comes of age and their first car is ever electric. And so their reference point is silent. And they have no ability to drive a manual transmission or no desire to, then you get into even, some horrible turbocharged DCT piece of shit from today that is of no interest to me whatsoever, is still orders of magnitude more of an experience than any EV is. And so I think you're right, but I think that's the point at which they're so, the group of automotive enthusiasts is so uneducated or so not uneducated, but has so little exposure to the breadth of experiences you can have with internal combustion that a DCT and a turbo is totally fine.
Yeah, and I think that this actually poses a fundamental question about where does the enthusiasm for automobiles originate. If it's motorsport, then you have to look at what happens in motorsport, because I think a lot of the sort of sensory experience of automobiles is inspired by that for a lot of people. And so is that, depending on the market you're in, is it NASCAR or is it rally or is it Formula One or is it Le Mans? As long as cars are making noises like that in motorsport and children or formative, impressionable youths are consuming cars in that way, I think there will be a place for it.
I'm not sure that motorsports really plays all that much anymore.
Yeah,
to be honest with you, I don't.
That was the question I was asking: is where does that enthusiasm for cars come from?
I think
for the next generation.
I think the fundamentals will always be there. It's a freedom, right? It's the ability to move. You're putting on a bionic suit and being able to move in ways that you can't move, right? That's ultimately what a car does. Right? I can't run down the street at 65 miles an hour, but the theater is definitely part of it. And so, the idea that noise isn't important is silly. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
we
wouldn't have
agree
music
with that
if that weren't the case.
And we certainly saw that play out as a dealer of Rimac cars. There was just a certain reaction or lack of reaction, even among people who were very happy to buy the latest and greatest new flavor of hypercar. The Rimacs almost always, failed to inspire.
That's an interesting one. I mean, look at Rimacs inherited Bugatti and put a new combustion engine in the Bugatti. And I think and by the way, Nevera didn't sell well from what I understand. Right. And And you and I have driven it. It's fucking spectacular, right? I think it takes a different type of audience to say, wow, I'm interested in this very different thing.
It also poses, I mean, it also answers a question that doesn't necessarily need that form factor to answer anymore, which is that because like things like Lucid Sapphire are so performant that like if the performance is the party trick, you don't need something shaped like that to do that anymore. And the type of person who buys an exotic shaped car is looking for impact, and impact comes from, you know,
All of your senses.
cold start on a 16-cylinder Bugatti, you know, or...
Well, it's all of your senses, to your point.
Yes.
That cold start is you're feeling it in terms of vibration.
Yeah.
You're hearing it, certainly. You're smelling it. I mean, there's every part of a combustion engine experience is that defining characteristic of why you're buying the car. And they're just, it's absent with EVs. And we are both EV fans, and yet...
For a certain mission.
Right. It's, I keep coming back to Ioniq 5N. Like that's a really, really big mindfuck for me because it's really good. It's really, really, really good. And I have no interest in it at all. And I have a buddy who bought one and is very happy with it. And I think that's great. I'm thrilled for him. I can't get excited about it, no matter how good it was on track. And it was spectacular. I just don't.
Do you feel that way about Lucid?
I don't want that level of performance. So what I like about the Lucid is that it's just so good at the limit and it's just a good daily driver. But I would probably have a much less performant version at a much lower price. Like $59,000 Lucid Air rear-wheel drive Pure speaks to me more than a $250,000 Sapphire. Part of that is self-preservation. I have a really strong self-preservation instinct. Many, many years ago, I think I probably mentioned this to you, but I had an E39 I had a first year E39 sedan and a last year E39 wagon. So a 97 528i automatic, and then a 2003 525i wagon automatic. And I could not sell the 528i. No one would buy it. I lived in Pennsylvania at the time. Just no market for that car there. And, you know, $8,000 or $10,000 was just too much for the average consumer because they needed to finance it. So they were buying stuff from the dealership, not through me. And after a year of trying to sell this car, I said, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of both of them. And the 525 wagon was a lease through my company. And so I brought them both to a dealership to trade them in on an E39 M5. And I thought, well, fuck it. I can trade both of these cars in, and for a little bit more, I can get an M5. And I went through the trouble of getting both cars to the dealership. And then that was what forced them to allow me, triggered them to allow me to drive the M5 because I was, 29 years old and they didn't want to let me drive it. But you show up in two trade-ins that you have. And I drove the M5 for about an hour and I came back and they had the paperwork done and everything was ready to go. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And the quote that I gave the guy was, my license would be gone by the end of the day and I'd be dead by the end of the week. And it was just at that point in my life, I could not have a 400 horsepower, 6-speed manual rear-wheel drive car because I saw what I did with that in the first hour. I was drifting it around on-ramps, drifting it around roundabouts. I was just terribly behaved. I'm like, you know what? I'll find a way to sell the 528 and just keep my slow as shit 525 automatic wagon. And so my sense of self-preservation or the preservation of my license is enough for me to say, I can't handle a Sapphire. Was it better? Sure. If it was the same price, probably I wouldn't have it. But I also don't, but in the case of the Ioniq 5, I don't want my daily dinghy, my sort of beat around, knock around hatchback to do the things that everything better dynamically than any of my old cars. It renders them redundant.
Yeah, but the experience is the thing, right? That it's always been the case that modern cars were better objectively at a variety of different things. But then
let me really bifurcate that. And let me go have a car that's not really about the experience at all. And I don't want it to be. I just want it to be useful. Even the stupid van. I mean, I joke a lot about my Vangina being supple, capacious. But what I love about that car is just so singularly focused on, let me just haul shit around. It's a pile of shit. We all know that about Chrysler vans, right?
It does. Their transmissions.
Don't say that word out loud. I can hear you. But this is an inexpensively built car that's built single-handedly for one mission and that's moving shit around efficiently. And I like that. If that thing had a V8 and rear-wheel drive, whatever, would it be better? No, I think that would bring a set of compromises that would make that worse at that singular task. And the same thing for an Ioniq 5N versus an Ioniq 5. I would want my Ioniq 5, if it were 5/8 scale, as a just slow, efficient, rides well daily driver.
E-Golf.
That's exactly why I have that car. Okay, I stupidly put big wheels and tires on and compromised a lot of the range and whatever else. But it gives me the thrill of being sideways around a corner on an on-ramp and then goes back to being supremely comfortable and supremely efficient. And I want that to be boxed in. I don't want it to overlap with my other cars. And I feel like that's what would happen with a Navara, for example, right? Why would you have a Chiron anymore if you had a Navara? You've removed the experience, but then made it faster.
I think the actual is, why would you have a Navara if you have a Chiron?
Yeah. Either way.
Yes.
I don't think those are going to, I mean, they do coexist. I do know someone who has one of each, and I'd be very curious to see which is the preferred sort of, I'm going to go have an experience. I think they're probably very different. I'm going to go blow the fucking doors off of every, Ferrari I see. Well, I'll take the Navara because it's that much faster. But yeah, I think clarity of purpose is really important in all cars, and supercars have they're best when their purpose is to entertain you.
Yes. I think clarity of purpose is really undervalued. Everyone instinctively might act on that basis and sort of be drawn to cars on that basis, but very few people actually consciously think about clarity of purpose. That was one of the things that really jumped out to me about the Veyron, is that just even things about like how the windows automatically raise themselves at 135 miles an hour or whatever it is, and how it goes into high downforce mode. Everything about that car is so obviously aimed at going fast. And I really admire the car for that. Does it make me want it? No, not necessarily.
The 850 CSI's windows, 850i's windows automatically go up at 100, right?
Okay.
Sorry. I had to throw that in there. The only one similarity between a BMW E31 and a Chiron, or Veyron.
Immense weight.
They probably do weigh about 6. Clarity of purpose, I think, is the defining characteristic of all wonderful cars. I don't think of any car that is really compromised and it's milquetoast that I'm interested in.
This is why the S550 is better than the S65.
Yeah, they've ruined the luxury part of a luxury car in order to make it sound and ride better.
Ride better.
No, handle better. I'm sorry. They killed ride.
Yes.
So the reason I'm confused is because my brain is already in the next part. Like, I guess my question is E39 M5, like M5 as a lineage. What's its clarity of purpose? Because to me, that is the opposite. That's a car that does everything well. And yet neither you or I own one. And I'm not interested in owning one.
It doesn't, though, have clarity of purpose because it's trying to do all things at once.
That's my point. So we hold that car like M5s in high regard. But it's a constrained amount of high regard that is limited by the lack of clarity of purpose of the car. The car... Wow. It's way too late in the day for that. I don't understand what the hell you just said.
So the car does a lot of shit well, but it doesn't deliver an 11 in any aspect, except for, I guess, drifting. I don't know.
No, okay,
but it's trying to do too many things simultaneously, and as a result, it doesn't deliver this precision,
even
or
if
focus
it's a
or
10,
clarity.
Right? Even if it's a 10 or 9 or 10 in every single category, it's still less desirable than something like an Elise that delivers a 10 on experience and then is a shit.
Yeah.
Grocery getter.
Yeah.
That's interesting. We should have done a whole episode on that rather than your fucking market observations. I'm kidding. No, your market observations are really interesting. You see the side of the industry that I don't.
Yes, and I guess I've thought I would take the time to do it now because it is not bad news. It's been so demoralizing for so long that I'm heartened by the fact, even if it does make my job more difficult at actually moving cars.
Look, the whole economy is going the same direction. Look at house sales, right? I mean, it went from, insane where you could, if you owned a house, great, lucky for you, but try to replace it. Haha. Where now you have a chance of, Now, okay, no one can sell their house because we'll get rid of our 3% mortgages.
That's right.
In exchange
that's
for
right.
10%.
That's creating an artificial sort of dynamic in the market that's causing things to not move right now.
And I think
people don't want to sell because...
Luckily, I think classic cars are partially immune to that sort of interest rate fluctuation because on the one hand, yes, collectors and speculators will say, well, here's a brick of $1,000. I can put it in the bank and get interest on it versus a car that needs oil changes and whatever else. But on the other hand, most people, I feel, don't finance their classic cars. And
I think it's probably
insulated.
advisable that a discretionary pleasure car probably shouldn't be financed unless it's appreciating at a rate that exceeds the interest rate, I guess.
You can't bank on that.
Yes,
so,
you can't and shouldn't.
So what I think I do have friends that have financed those cars, and it's because for whatever reason with their credit unions or whatever, they have gotten an interest rate on the car that's below what they're able to get in the market or through other strategic investments. So rather than pay, they'll pay 6% interest on a car loan because they can get 10% on that money somewhere else. That makes sense.
Yes.
If you're that sort of speculator type. But I think mostly if you can't afford that $6,000 Honda Beat, don't be financing it. That's a recipe for disaster.
I 100% agree with that. And, we are now 7 months into this business. We're right at $10 million of sales and we have not done a single finance deal.
Yeah. I can't imagine people are financing big cars.
The big cars, there's a few people who do it. And the terms are absolutely atrocious, like just highway robbery. I don't know why that people do that, but they do. It's people who have
huge incomes and
no assets.
That'd be the only way I could do it.
Yeah, but the interest rate is so high that it's they shouldn't own that car. In my opinion, they should be banking that money or buying things they can't afford and not be spending that much on interest.
Right,
but. If they're sure that that's what's going to happen.
Your whole living, is a result of irrational purchases.
Yes, that is 100% true. And I am proud of that. I am proud of the ability to participate in joy. I make sure people have joy. And I like that. I have joy as a result of that. So it's a fun place to be. Although my work is other people's hobbies, which means sometimes they don't take it seriously and don't behave in a professional manner because it's them playing, and that has very real implications for those of us who do it for a living, and that's shitty.
Same. I mean, I take my job very seriously, even though it literally says "professional idiot" on my shirt, which you can buy if you want. See, smooth, right? For those listening, I just gave myself a dirty look because that was not smooth. No, I mean, I take the journalistic part of what we do very seriously, even though it's my job to make it look like I'm having fun all the time. And that is a bit of a kick in the pants when, people don't realize that this is real work.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not going to complain about it because we could be...
Yeah, because the alternative is doing other real work. But
we're doing things we hate, involving things we have no interest in, rather than things we like doing.
And we tolerate it because we get to interact with the things that we love. Yeah, as a result.
My only complaint is that I spend so little time with cars these days. Right, the production of the production of what we do is takes me away from actually going and driving and playing with cars.
I don't have that problem. Yeah. Sometimes I'm a little too close.
I'm very jealous of your Instagram feed.
And we have a leaking water pump or some problem with a car that needs unfucking, that there are old cars, and then you get to deal with all the shitty part of stuff. The plus side is you get to do the nice part too, but
I have a middle finger right here that is a constant reminder that I love working on cars. This was the rover. It's still here.
Still,
it won't go
blood
away. It's
under your nail.
Bloody under the nails, but that is actually, I don't enjoy the blood under my nail. I do really enjoy interacting and working on the cars. And so every chance I get, I do that, but not enough. Okay. Thank you for the market insight and for bringing joy to people all over the world with their
and oil leaks. I bring joy and oil leaks, which are one and the same.
They were like that old song, joy and pain, sunshine and rain, and oil leaks.
Really? Is that a real song?
The beginning was, not the oil leaks part. Oh. If they had, whoever it was that recorded that song, I don't remember, had owned vintage Italian cars, they would have added an oil leak.
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
All right. Thank you for joining us. We will talk to
See you
you
next week. Is
at
next week? What's next week's episode? Whatever. Doesn't matter. They'll find out.
We surely don't know.
Who are you?
Yes.
It's not an answer.
Well, that shows you how much I know about who I am.